Oh, there we go. Now we are live. Now our lovely disclaimer starts. Now we wait for the RTMP servers to detect us streaming, and that's it. So I was gonna say coffee and dev. I'm so used to doing these tech at scale in the morning things. I was like, and another coffee and dev, and here I have my coffee. I'm like, wait, I don't even
Wait.
have coffee. I have water.
Oh, we should upgrade to
Another
beers.
yeah, I thought so. But for me, it's like 7 o'clock. If I have a beer now, my sleep just grew terrible. But another tech at scale, fireside chat is what I've been calling these with, you know, none other than Andre. You know, if you've
The
seen any of
guest.
the other ones, you know who Andre is. It's not even the guest; it's just the
Yeah.
only guest. Um, on today's topic of how to get developers to apply, um, and you had some thoughts, so I will let you
Yeah.
start with this.
Um, that is a very. So I'm going to kind of approach it from the perspective of someone who recently applied for a job. The way I kind of did it was twofold. The one was these are the companies I'm interested in, purely because they've got visible products, or I've had friends who work there, or whatever the case is. And I spoke to them and said, "Hey, should I apply?" A few people said, "Terrible idea, don't do it." Other people were like, "Yeah, for sure, we can give you reference," and that was cool. But then the fascinating part was I used a hiring service, put my profile in, said like, "This is what I've done. This is what I want to do. Reach out to me." And there were companies that came back that I was like, "Oh wow, I'd never thought of applying to these places purely because I sort of overlooked it. In hindsight, I was like, why didn't I think of applying to these places?" Other places just do a terrible job in explaining what the hell they do on the technical side. The companies that aren't necessarily technical companies, where they're like, "Oh yes, we do retail, or we do logistics, or we do whatever the case is. We've got a huge infrastructure need. We've got a huge internal cloud computing need. We've got whatever the case is. Like we're scaling. We're going from monolith to microservices." And those companies, you don't know anything about them. So they, there's no way I would have ever applied to them. And the only way that I ended up getting to apply to them was through a third-party hiring service. So yeah, I think there's a bunch of different categories here of different companies and how to get developers to apply. There was a lot of consideration that I took into place. Like,
Was it what like when you were reading through the descriptions, were you focused on like understanding what technologies you would work with, or was it that plus what the business does, or like if I gave you a company that was what you're most comfortable on the stack and what you want to learn technical, but the business side was something that you had no idea about, like is that like you don't want to look at it all, or so yeah.
that's a good question. I think if I'm understanding correctly, yeah, there's definitely situations where you look at it and you're like, am I just curious about the tech stack? Am I curious about what the company does? Am I just wanting that internal merch that I can walk around with and be like, "Hey, I work here now," which is a real thing. Like I could be given shitty tasks, and when people say to me, "Where do you work?" I'm like, "Well, I work here," and then they go, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I work here," and don't never tell them that like I'm actually doing really crappy stuff. Um, that was a difficult thing that I had to sort of think through and talk to a lot of people about was, does it make sense to go to a company, for instance, any of the large online retailers who are doing migrations from monolith to microservices? Cool, that's a project. They kind of understand that they've got scaling issues. They've gotten someone who's gotten to a position of making decisions and said, we can't scale. The only way to do this is to move to the new technologies. And this is not something that is just trivial. We don't have the in-house skill to do it. We need to employ people. But the real concern that came up for me with those cases were, yes, I like the tech stack. It's interesting work. It's an interesting scale problem. What happens when I'm done? Like, they're not innovation companies. They'll claim that they're innovating in the space, but not necessarily. Another example was a financial services company that was like, hey, we're providing customers with this service on the cloud. And then I had a chat with the CTO and said, that's fine, but why would people use your product just because it's on the cloud? And there, they are losing, I assume, a number of people because they can't answer the question of like, what do you do after you've done this project? So I think there's a number of examples of people doing the wrong thing to not get talent, but how to actually get them to apply, I have no idea. You can be, I guess you can be fussy when you get a list of like 10 people and they're like, these 10 people are interested in you. And you're like, okay, 7 of them are cool, 2 of them are really great.
Yeah.
The other 3 that I've never heard of or don't make sense to me, maybe I'll chat to them, maybe I won't. Like, am I missing an opportunity here? But it's, if you don't have a big name or you don't have a presence at like a university or a set of developers who go out and like evangelize your team, how the hell do you let us know that you're looking? And how do you let us know in such a way that we think about actually wanting to apply? That's a difficult question.
I've been mixed bag here on both. I went to companies that had tech stacks that had nothing related to, but the business was interesting, and I was like, ooh, that's what I want to do. Like, that sounds like a spot that I could carve out in the industry. It tends to be the things that aren't always legal.
That's it. There's potential.
Depends
There's
on,
always growth.
depends on your country. That's what I should say before that. So it's, nothing like actually like where I'm employed has gotten me into jail or anything. Just in some countries the laws are different than others. So the other times I've gone to companies that's like not really excited about the industry, but hey, I think the tech is going to be interesting. There's also been times where it's just the team. It's actually been like, oh, the company's kind of meh. The tech stack is like, okay, whatever. But then you meet the individuals you're going to work with, and you're like, okay, that's why I'm going to go work here. So I guess to get developers to apply, I think having a way to actually, so the last company I used to work at, MindGeek, the reason or how I even came to apply to that company was a YouTube video that one of the people in their data scientist team did a meetup and talked about what they were doing and how they built the system and how it was handling large amounts of data. And that was enough for me to actually pull up the person and see where they work. And I was like, all right, that's where I want to go apply. So that's how I actually ended up applying there. So I think that's one way to get people is like, there's a lot of companies, Etsy, Netflix, who else is on there? Mostly probably those two that come to mind at least. I've read the engineering blogs enough where I'm like, I actually think it would be pretty, Wayfair is another. It'd actually kind of be fun to work there. Just on the technical challenges and some of the business aspect of it, you get insights off the blogs. I don't know if you had anything.
There's the thing you mentioned there about the individuals is one that is an intriguing one. I've been not in the position myself, but a friend of mine has gotten in a place where it's been, hey, this company's scaling up. They have no real understanding of this tech or that tech, but they've just employed 6 people. And all 6 of these people are like people I've worked with or heard of or interacted with, and I want to be on a team with them. Do you think it's a good idea or not? And that's a difficult situation. Like, if you take, I guess, a shitty sports analogy, if you take expert individual players and you put them on the same team, you can't guarantee success. So there's that gamble there. However, if you've worked with someone like in one place and worked with someone in another place, and then someone says, hey, we're making a team, we've picked these 3 experts, here we go. There's good opportunity there and there's good potential. The other kind of, I guess, elephant in the room is, how do you get developers to apply? Pay a huge amount of money and let everyone find out. Like, that's
okay. So that works. I mean, that definitely works. I would say paying even just competitive, and then having something that makes developers not realize it's totally garbage.
Yep.
Like, this was a while ago, so I used to live in Ottawa. This was like 7 years ago when Shopify was 50 employees. And I don't think they were paying like crazy, compared to like the FANGs, but in the Ottawa area, they were paying competitive because they didn't have to hire in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
So it meant that they could pay like 30% less in the Bay Area, but 30% more than Ottawa, and they would look like unsung heroes in that city because they were paying more than that area.
Yep.
But the main reason why people wanted to work there was young startup, hyper growth, and just people that seem to like really just want to build something quickly and out the door and move forward. So yeah, obviously if you're not paying competitive at all, then I mean, you're gonna have a hard time. But if you're paying great, then it's like you said, it's a lot easier.
There we go. I know that there's been cases where some places have arrived and being like, so really embarrassing story for the person on the other end of this. There was a hiring, like a recruitment event at the university I attended, and I had gone back a number of times as a recruiter for the company. No HR representation was allowed to be at the recruiting event. They obviously couldn't enforce it, but they basically said, you pay a sponsorship, you end up getting a booth. The expectation version of this is you have developers who are able to talk to potential candidates who are filling those roles. They needn't be engineers. If you're looking for PMs, that's PM experts or whatever the case is, but this was focused predominantly on engineers. And someone proceeded to say, they're the CTO of this company, they've just opened shop, they pay insanely well, like everyone will be shocked. The problem was they didn't pay that well, and they didn't realize that they didn't even know where they were paying in the market. And they were at the event, they said this out loud in their presentation, they then got a long line of people coming to chat to them, and other big companies were there, including Onefang, that openly told them how much the interns are going to get paid. And this poor person was like, I don't pay as well as they do. So now you've set an expectation, which is bad. And it just wrecked this person's opportunity, even though the pay wasn't bad and getting in was significantly easier than getting into the Fang that was there. They'd screwed it completely because they said, like, we will pay you ridiculous amounts of money. And it was relatively not true.
Yeah. And it's not even good in that sense because, okay, you have a bunch of developers applying with this. Maybe it stops before they even apply because they straight up just ask you like, okay, what's the range? And then you realize, okay, skip. But if you don't, and people are like, oh, great, let's get you in the pipeline, let's figure it out. And then you waste everyone's time because you just set this high expectation that you're not going to deliver. And even if you're, like you said, oh, you paid competitive, but you're not the 0.1% payer, you know, maybe you're in the top 5% and you are very competitive. But when you set that expectation, like, oh, we pay the best in the market, and you're sitting at an event and you're like, yo, X Fang company's right there. So you just set a very high bar. And then all the people are like, oh, well, I'm going to add you to the places apply to. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm wasting my time, which is not good because then what happens is that individual then goes and says, they don't pay as much as they say they do.
Exactly.
And then you don't have the context of that. So you could be like a dev in a team and you're like, oh, I'm thinking of applying at X. And someone's like, they don't pay as much as you think they do. And the other person might not even apply then, even though that might actually be what their market rate is and what is acceptable. The other person has a different perspective and what the rate should be. But because you've set this expectation that you pay the best and then you find out you don't, it's like, oh, okay. I think it was this worked well. Market rate with vision of greatness works as well.
There we go.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. I think if you can balance both my, I don't know, how would you phrase it? Like actual remuneration in terms of cash with my personal growth and my sense of achievement, you're golden. You don't have to pay the most. You don't have to offer me the most hardcore technology, and you don't have to have me being impacting the world. However, if you can get that triangle to balance quite neatly, I would love to be there. But how do I know that you're doing that? And the HR brochure typically is indistinguishable from any other company. All of them are changing the world. All of them behave like startups. All of them have competitive pricing. None of those things are quantifiable.
Other thing is, you know, I think there's a lack of I don't know, effort at someone's obviously responsible for this. I don't know if it's engineering or recruitment or who or both, but when you put out job descriptions that are just generic shit, the same thing that every other job description has, but now maybe you copy pasted some different tech stack,
Yeah.
and you don't discuss anything about what position is. Like, I understand when companies are literally like swamped in the sense of like, we just raised around, we just got the funding, we're hiring 400 devs.
Yeah.
Like, just okay, it's a blanket position you're hiring, but there are plenty of companies who are looking for like individuals to fill like a role in a team.
Yep.
So if you already know where that individual is going to, it's not like a general hire and then find what team they fit in.
Yep.
You're hiring to fix X or to be on team Y. Then why don't you put that up front and just talk about it even before they get to recruitment phase? Just write on the job description.
Yep.
Like, I feel like sometimes people think it's a bait and switch. Like, oh, we get them in on a general thing, and then we can just find another team if they're good in bands and they're good on the tech stack. Great, we'll just find a different team for them. And I mean, that's different if you got hired in a general sense of a position that didn't get associated to a team. But there are plenty of companies that, you know, I've applied to, and then you find out like, oh, it's for a very precise role. I just waste my time because I have zero interest in X.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's like, okay, I get this information, and then next interview you ask about some stuff to get additional details, and then you realize, nah, this is not gonna work. And I don't know. You just need to cut down on that time and just like drive better candidates to what are going to end up going through your process than just trying to get garbage. So how to get developers apply is, I guess, a trap here. It's making sure you get the correct developers to apply.
That's probably a better way of phrasing it. I totally agree with you that there's that generic. So they are definitely generalists. I would consider myself a generalist where I've done a bunch of different things. I've got interest in certain space. I'm the worst person when someone says, "What do you want to work on?" Tell me what the options are and we can figure it out from there. But there are cases where I've seen generalist ads, and then when I've spoken to the recruiter or the person who put the ad out, they give me a far more excited and colorful version of that ad. But then when I talk to the actual manager, it is a super specific task that happens to correlate to some of those things, but doesn't really. And you're left with this feeling of like, okay, what is actually going to happen here? Like, am I getting a bait and switch or not? So should I apply? Shouldn't I apply? Who's more accurate? Who's not? So yeah, and don't put an ad out that requires generalists with expert level skill in everything. There's generalist wanted, must be able to understand like C++, Java, Go, Rust, all of those things at an expert level. I'm like, what are you doing? What the hell are you doing besides arguing profusely and not being sure about what your tech stack is?
And
yeah.
must have done Rust for plus 10 years, and you're like, okay.
Exactly that. Like, I want to have a Rust engineer who's been around for ages. I want to have someone, and then there's also fun ones where it's, I need a Python engineer. You're like, great. And then you're like, get there, and they tell you about how they're using Python 2 point something from forever ago, but then they're using Rust at the same time. Like, what are the chances that I've remained relevant in one area? And like, you're looking for a unicorn based on your limitations, not an industry-wide thing. So there were a few of those. I do understand that there are jobs which make sense where they will tell you one thing because they don't want to expose what they're actually doing. Like, their competitive advantages, they're migrating to Go for some or other reason. They can say C++ or Java engineer wanted. Go would be great. And then when you interview, if you can do any of those three, you can probably move to the other without too much issue. So that's good. But
I don't think that's competitive edge, though. I think that is some like exec who thinks that's secret sauce, and then it's like, fucking whatever language you pick is no secret sauce. Like,
don't tell anyone.
You know,
if your
even
language,
even
yeah.
worse, because like if your competitor is in the same language as you and then open sources something that's like not your secret sauce but you can use. For example, the perfect example is where I am now is another company in the same space has released like a DNS test tool that they use,
Mm-hmm.
and then they donated it to like a nonprofit neutral organization related to like DNS research. This is actually what we also use to test our DNS server. So
Okay.
it's like, and they win because we make contributions back, and we win because they built it originally. But that's not the secret sauce. Testing your DNS server is not your secret sauce. Even if you're a DNS company, the test framework around this is not the secret sauce of the company, right? Like,
But it's always DNS. No,
are,
this
are you RFC compliant to the protocol? Like that's your secret sauce. It's like no,
This-
that's like
yeah, I think you're right. It doesn't necessarily make sense in that direction at all. There's the I also think there's something else here, like changing trajectory slightly. If I decided it's time for me to move on, my conversations with people I know, people I've interacted with, and it could be indirect, it could be direct, it could be people in chat, it could be people who've watched streams or tweeted or whatever. A DM to them going, "Hey, I'm fairly certain you work here. Are you enjoying it? Yes or no?" That's a make or break. You can send me all the glossy ads, you can send me all sorts. If they come back and they say something like, "Listen, they're going to give you a great starting salary, raises are impossible, and they're going to burn you out." Non-starter. So now you've got the situation where all the marketing, all the I guess advertising of whatever is there doesn't matter if it's not true. If there's a disjoint between what's happening and what you're saying is happening, the devs will find out. There's only so many of us, which is a surprisingly small group when you think about it. And
isn't there what is that site called? Is it Whisper or something like that?
so it's the anonymous social network.
Yeah,
Blind.
exactly. Oh, Blind, that's it. So
Yeah.
so on Blind, you could get if the company's big enough, you can get anything you
Yeah.
want. Like it's no longer just Glassdoor and you go read the reviews for the company. Is that like a quarterly all hands? It's like, all right, guys, it'd be really great if everyone posts on Glassdoor saying how great it is to work here. You know, we need to be a great place. And then what happens is someone comes on Blind. It's like, hey, what's the spill the tea on this company? And people are like, XYZ, and you're like, oh God, and you're like, avoid. So yeah, I will say that it works from a negative aspect, but there's also times where, like my current job, I got through, knowing the CTO, and that's who reached out to me. It was like, and I knew how he ran the company that he worked at and the companies he was going to work at. And I was like, that fits. Like, that's good enough. Like, that's actually enough for him to say, like, hey, you should work here. It's like, sign me up.
Yeah.
Like, and there's a couple of people, I don't know about you, but in my network where if they show up and are like, it's a legit company, you should come work here. I'm like drop what I'm doing, go work.
I've literally gotten a job exactly like that, where a friend of mine who I studied with said to me, "Hey, you're looking to get back into the city where my family was and everything, and I was about a couple of 1,000 kilometers away. Flew in on the weekend, and he said to me, 'Let's go out for dinner.' Went out, and he's like, 'So the company I'm at has a little R&D division that's breaking off into a new company. They would love to have you. I think it's the good call for you, personally, as a person who studied with you, who knows you relatively well.' And I trusted the person, and I still do. And when he said this to me, I was like, dude, if you're telling me the work is interesting, the reward is there, the risk is there, and he was very transparent. It's a startup. There was risk, of course. My immediate thought was, okay, cool, we're doing this, and we did. So yeah,
with the regrets and without the regrets.
there was the risk turned out to be
quite the risk.
Quite the risk.
I was gonna say the same thing. It's like, where I am now, like I think I'm up to 5 referrals at the company. So how companies should get developers is like, you need to have like the obvious stuff, a good enough company but it needs to be good enough that people are going to be willing to, like, I feel like I risk my own reputation when I tell someone, like, you should apply here and come work here, and if
Yes.
it's not going to work out for them. From the company standpoint, because I bring in a bad hire, but equally for them because they feel like
Reputation.
they got like,
Absolutely.
oh, you said it was going to be a challenging company, and they're holding what, like, the bar of what I consider challenging. And if I'm just bullshitting because I'm like, oh God, we need to fill this position, like, they're never going to trust that again. They're never going to take what I say serious anymore. It's always going to be like, well,
Yeah.
he just probably wants a referral bonus, right? Like,
Exactly
um,
that.
yeah.
So it sounds to me like the one thing we can definitely agree on here is if you have a established developer who's working at this company and they go out and actually provide referrals, not hollow, like, here's someone I found on LinkedIn, but here is a colleague of mine who I worked with. This person should join our team. I will reach out to them. There is a good chance that, like, I absolutely have friends who've tomorrow phoned me and said, I've got a startup. This is the plan. What do you think? We've got a position for you. I would be almost ready to say yes, even before finding out the idea, because of the quality of individual and the way that they have progressed and that they've never done something like that until it's really needed. I have other friends who are like, this startup is incredible. They are the most amazing. You should join. And then 3 months later, he's like, that one I was mistaken about. This new one, you should totally join it. And that kind of person, like you say, the reputation has been tarnished by their crying wolf. But yeah, it's super difficult to do that. So if you're hiring at the moment, say, how the hell do you find someone?
I typically go through my own network.
Mm-hmm.
I think aside from co-ops, I think everyone that when I've been looking to hire is prior people I've worked with. Because you already know what the expectations are. You don't even need to test it. Like, it's more about, okay, is this person going to be happy at this company? Are they going to meet the cultural whatever requirements the company is looking for, and vice versa? Like, it's a good cultural fit for them. They agree with what the company wants for values. The rest is like, I've worked with them either directly or indirectly enough that they know what they're signing up with me. It's like, you know how I work. I know how you work. I know what your contributions are going to be. Like, you know what you're going to have to put up with working with me. And then at that point, it's usually like, all right, like, go through the process. And as long as, the company is fine with you and you're happy with the company, great. Like, just sign. Outside of that, it's usually recruitment. But I will say that at MindGeek, I had found a couple of people through meetups, like tech meetups. And I will say that the problem with you can't send your recruitment team to these meetups. Okay. Like, if you want to sponsor that stuff, you're better to not send your person and your people's team to that event and waste their time, and just tell them, like, your intro slide has to say that it was sponsored by us and that we're hiring. Because having your recruiter there probably isn't going to change much, because if it's an engineering event, like, they're probably going to want to know what they'd be actually working on and what the technical challenges are. The best thing I think those companies can do is, like, find a way to get someone at your company to, like, sponsor the event, but say, like, oh, we have a speaker that we would like to be included at the meetup in a lightning talk for 15 minutes. And it's not a plug. It's not like, here's how to use our company's API. No. I mean, like, legitimately something of meetup worthy from your company, from an engineer to go there and actually talk about. Because you know what's going to happen? Right after that, if it's something of interest, I'm going to go to that engineer and be like, tell me more about this. Is there any availability? Like, how hard is it to get in? Like, because you're going to find something of interest, and then you're going, and then that's where that person can be like, great, you should contact HR and ask to be on team X. So yeah,
I think traditional, how do I phrase this without pissing off everyone? Traditional business operates differently to how tech does. The marketing brochures, the sales techniques, the way in which you gain customers is very, very different to how you engage with potential candidates. There are many people I've worked with where money has not been a deciding factor. If the work is shitty, doesn't matter. Me personally, I will turn down a lot more money if the company is not being transparent or honest with me. As soon as that relationship is broken, I'm done. Like, I can't bullshit myself to perform with your company. And the result of that is I can't go to a recruitment event and someone stands up and starts telling everyone about their most amazing revolutionary technology, but they can't explain certain aspects of it. I mean, I've gotten a cold call from a recruiter telling me that they've simulated the stock market and that it's almost guaranteed to return massive yields. I was like, that's fascinating. How have you done this? And they're like, oh, it's completely proprietary. So I was like, you do understand that it makes no sense at all for you to phone me if this is true. Like, what you're saying makes no sense, because if I simulated it and it was accurate, I would be on my island that is like slowly getting bigger and bigger. It doesn't make any sense. And they were upset with me for asking these questions, but you can't do that. So don't over glamorize. An engineer expects there to be blind spots or ugliness in a product or a code base or whatever the case is. That's why we have jobs. That's what we do all the time. So to be like, come work for us, everything's perfect. What am I going to do then? There's got to be something there. So yeah, I think having developers interact with developers can be better. It's hard if you've got a shitty product because you're going to find out about it. So that's a different one.
Even shitty products, there's always something of engineering interest behind the scenes.
Yes.
Like the problem, like the product for the business sense could be like something that you don't even care about. Like, I don't know, gerbil to gerbils. Like, we have a software that manages gerbils, and like, unless that's your world, like you're like, I don't, like, whatever. I'm building software, and even if some of the tech stuff is janky, and you're like, listen, some COBOL code written like 20 years ago, and no one's touching whatever. I mean, we talked about it. I feel like
always legacy code,
like the legacy code. There's always a fun thing to that, but there's somewhere in there that's going to be of interest to someone. Like, for me, hearing that, I'm like, oh man, that sounds like something I haven't really done of like that far back, and like, how do you build a pipeline to migrate this from whatever this monolithic repo or mono repo that's monolithic app into whatever you want. It doesn't have to be microservices, but like, how do I refactor it from that to this other code? And like, I think that's just perspective and how you really look at things. And I mean, I'm not one to be married to the tech stack at all. I don't go like, I mean, I'll be honest and say, like, I'm not interested at all in front end stuff. So if the job says it's front end, I'm just like, no, sorry.
Yeah.
But if it's like, oh, we use Python, oh, we use Java, or we use C++, or we use like whatever, this is less. I mean, it factors in my, I think, confidence of thinking, how likely am I to get through this versus other candidates, right? Like, if you have someone who scores the same as me throughout, but has 6 years on the stack that they're already using, like, that's going to heavily weigh in the decision. So that's a factor. But from my perspective, it's like, I don't care what you're really using. Like,
yeah, that's I guess it's not really the how to get people to apply. Maybe like I've been in a situation where
nothing about applying.
No, like what you said is like you've got this commit, like you're interested in certain tech, if I find out that I'm joining a team and 7 of the people there have worked on a specific language or style of doing things for an extended period of time, and I'm the only one who's coming in with another perspective, and you're telling me that I'm being tasked with bringing in this new perspective, I've been bitten by that before and it doesn't work. You can't be like, hey, we have these, in my case, we have these 6 engineers. They've all worked in .NET and MVC pattern style front end for the last 10 years. Come in, we're thinking about migrating to more of a thin front end with microservices behind it. Seemed sensible to a naive me going, I can get there and convince them. No dice. There was nothing I could have said to that group of people that would have changed their mind. I could have stood there with evidence that what they were doing was potentially not the greatest, which in my mind, it's still the case. Like, there's a good reason why people are moving from what they were doing to pretty much anything else. And there's an idea of like, I'm not going to apply for this job. That's it. I'm not going to do any kind of, I'm not going into a political battle again. If you say to me, we have 6 engineers, they're all mid-tier, you are coming in as a technical lead. You have authority to be able to impart your views on certain things with some degree of authority, perhaps, because then you can at least do things, get them done, and earn trust. But there's an example of like, be realistic about what the hell the position is. You can't, and I'm fairly confident that the reason that I was brought in was by someone who has no development experience. Yeah. There's a, yeah, if they bring you in with new perspective, they can also give you the power to enforce the perspective. In this case, enforce new design. Yeah. So there was a situation where I didn't realize, that was how it was sold to me. I think that's an awesome thing. It was sold to me as, hey, you can do this. And then it was like,
So an awesome display.
So yeah, it's like, here we go, do this. The examples I have are I'm going to say annoying, because I am now knowing at the time I was a bit more junior, and I was like, I think we should do this. And they were like, no, I'm not willing to die on this hill. Like, if you sent me back in time, put me in that position, it would be a case of like, this is why. These are the 5 reasons that the current design is not even bad. It's fucking horrendous, and it's not going to work. Consequently, it didn't. But that was the situation. So yeah, I think that's a lesson I learned. If a company is really looking for you to apply and they reach out to you, that is the person who's reaching out to you, who's not a developer or doesn't have the internal, it's not the hiring manager, will pitch it to you as like, you're going to come in, you're going to have all this authority, it's going to be amazing. Meanwhile, what's really happening is something significantly different. So yeah, I guess that boils down to just an anecdotal bit of like, be honest about it and share the actual truth on what's happening.
Why it's use your referrals.
Yes.
To actually have legitimate job descriptions of what they're going to be working on.
Yep.
And then I think the other part of this is like how to get people to follow through the process. Because I have a lot of recruitment friends who tell me like they get through the first screening and then like the candidate will just ghost them.
Yep.
So I will actually I want to show you something if I can find it. Okay, so neither me nor Andre work at Wealthsimple. This is not a plug for Wealthsimple. I mean, indirectly it is because it's their slides.
Mm-hmm.
Wealthsimple is a finance company for those who don't know. It's in Canada. And I actually had gotten this from someone who applied there and asked me for feedback on what I thought about this. So when they applied, their first stage, they actually got something that, can I get this to like fit to page there? So it tells you like the different domains of teams they have, the different types of products the company have, the different type of like other departments and things like that they have. and then they walk you through their
Okay.
entire interview journey of like what is expected, like what they're focusing on it, and then like they give you a little bit blurb of it, and then here they even give you like, oh, you know, on the project review, it's not a coding interview. You're more than welcome to bring some code to walk you through. Like they really, really out. I think I actually showed you this before. I feel like I showed you this
I
before.
think you've mentioned it to me, but I'm vaguely recalling you mentioning it because I'm sure we said like the idea that this gives you confidence that you can get through the process makes me more inclined to apply because I know
Well,
what the
yeah.
hell I'm getting into.
The only thing I'd say for this company is I think they should have this even before you even apply, because
Yeah.
it's so like they even tell you like, okay, this one you're going to be bringing a systems design. They give you tips, and then they say like what they're going to focus on. So like, hey, like, you know, we recommend providing visual aids to explain the system that you're bringing, so screenshots, virtual whiteboards, etc. So like you come prepared. It's not this. It's not this theoretical thing. It's not this. You walk in with a system and you don't realize like, oh, it's going to be torn apart, or oh, I should have brought diagrams to explain this. Like, oh, I just made notes on what the system, like how load balancer works in our blah 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 application.
Yep.
And like yeah, they walk through the entire thing, and then they talk about like they have a pair programming section and all this, and like if you ever want to see how a company wants people to apply, I highly recommend looking at Wealthsimple. Like, I don't think so. I'm just sharing the
Seems
one
like a
thing.
good case study. Yeah.
Yeah, but they have a career page that really goes into it. I was like, here, maybe we can just pull it out.
Yeah.
Like I said, neither of us work here, and I don't get anything. And
Yeah.
I just thought they had a really good career page.
That like there's so many reasons. So even if I decide that a company is interesting, I look at their webpage, someone said you send me a page and you're like, hey, check out this new product, it's amazing. If there's no visibility, I'm going to be petrified. What the hell are they looking for? It's a fintech company potentially. Do they want crypto experience? Do they want someone who lives NFTs, who like eats, sleeps, and breathes and tweets about them? Or do they want something else? So yeah, that helps a lot.
So I'm not going to bring it up, but they have a ton of material on why they want people to apply. They have like a cultural manual even before you apply that talks about what the company wants and how they operate as a company, and I think that's 10 pages alone, like a similar length.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, I will give it to them on this that they have the advantage of being an open consumer product, so there's no theory in what you'd be
Yeah.
working on.
Yeah.
You're in the US, so they're not there. But I, as a Canadian, if you ask any Canadian, like, oh, do you know Wealthsimple? And if they're between 18 to 50, they probably know what Wealthsimple is. And they
Mm-hmm.
probably have one of the apps installed on their phone.
Okay.
So you can definitely relate. But even if you're not in a space that's consumer centric and it's enterprise, then like for the love of God, like, point me somewhere that's just not marketing fucking material. That's
Yeah.
like vapeware. Like I actually want to see what the product is. I actually want to see what I've been working on. I want to know what, like I said, what I'm going to be doing there. Because if you have no idea, you're, even if the tech stack looks interesting, you're like, I don't know, why both companies have the same tech stack, but this other one sounds more interesting than this one. Why apply to the other one? Unless you're just spamming, like you're just like, fuck it, apply.
That's the other thing. I mean, I'm going to be honest and say that I took the approach with a number of companies where I was like, you're interview practice. But to be honest, either you interview practice or I'm not applying. So me saying that might be insulting, but it's actually giving you the benefit of the doubt because I'm going to sit down with you for an hour. And if you convince me that this is the place to apply, I will apply. However, I'm going in with this being an exercise in learning about what interviews are like now, having not done one in a while. So there's for sure a visibility and honesty, just give me information about what I'm going to be doing, what I'm expected to be good at, what the process is about, and then I will apply. I'm not going to commit. It's kind of weird. Like imagine sending an invite to someone and being like, I'm picking you up at 9 p.m. on Thursday. Are you available? Like, what for? Like, are you taking my kidneys or are you buying me ice cream? Like, I need some
Oh,
insight here. Yeah. So I need some insight here. So can you help me at least understand? Or no one wants to apply to a company to be lambasted in an interview for an hour. To have someone awkwardly say to you, well, legally, I can't send you out right now. So we're just going to talk about how much you're not qualified for this job. Tell me about the biggest team you've led. Like, I haven't. Okay, tell me about the time you had to make financial decisions for the team. Never done that either. And you're like, by the third question like that, you're realizing, why the hell did you guys reach me? Why did I apply for this? There's nothing related to what I'm doing or what I should be doing or any of those things. So someone made a mistake somewhere. Having, like you just showed, a document that's like, this is what we're going to go through. We're going to go through code. I've interviewed a person who is the CTO of a smaller company. When I asked them a technical question, they told me very confidently they would relate to the question as best they could, but probably consult their technical team lead. So I was like, okay, fine. This is a development position. This is not a management position. And then they got very upset because they felt like they applied for a dev job, but their resume should have justified them becoming a manager, which was insane. On their part, it was total delusion of grandeur. But there's things like that. Like, why did this person even apply? There was obvious miscommunication there. So yeah, be transparent, be open, say what the hell's going on.
I think there's also a factor of try and come up with a process that's, I don't want to say different, because I feel like companies are going to hear that and be like,
Yes.
oh, we need to do it this very different way that nobody understands and everyone's going to hate it. But I do think that there's like, okay, if you are the 0.1% of companies, so fangs and pre-fangs, and you're in the unicorn of hypergrowth, your issue is not this topic. It is not how to get developer supply. It is how to weed down the numbers and eliminate, because you have the opposite problem: is you have too many applicants and you want only the top X% of that. So you're going to have a process that's very structured and rigid, and is going to ask a lot of people because you're considered a high bar. That's just how you happen to be fortunate enough in that spot. But I think not everyone. There are a lot of companies that look at that and say, we should mimic that because the best company does that. And it's like, your pipeline of candidates coming in is already so small. And now you're going to add this entry of barrier. And if you make yours that hard, people are just going to spend the extra month or two prepping and go apply at these other companies. And if you can't match comp, then what are you doing? Like you're just shooting yourself right in the foot. Like,
that is too real. That is legitimately, I'm laughing at that because I walked into an interview for a company that I was like, maybe this is interesting. The level of question was insane. Completely insane. I had seen the question they asked me 2.5 weeks prior. And it wasn't oh, can you solve this as a tricky thing to it? It was purely an implementation question. Implement the most efficient LRU cache you can, which is a nasty question. And the person said to me, do you know what an LRU cache is? And I said, yes. And they said, how would you design one? So I'm like, okay, there's 2 parts here. Do you want me to tell you about the really optimal solution? And do you expect me to implement this in 45 minutes? And they were like, yes, let's do that. Told them the optimal solution, which I'd done on LeetCode and I knew was on the top end of the performance. Banged out the code, got to the end of it, and said to the guy, point blank, I cannot believe you asked me that question. And he went, why? So I said, have you asked the question before? He said, yes, multiple times. And I said, has anyone else gotten it? He said, hardly anyone. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I wanted to say, I'm fairly confident anyone who's gotten that answer is not going to want to work here because it doesn't make sense. You're asking a question that is harder than a Google interview question. Why would I want to work here? You're not doing anything revolutionary. you're doing something novel, which is pissing me off, but there's nothing here that's going to make me apply. You've made me work just as hard as all the other companies because you're mimicking it blindly. But what you want doesn't make sense.
Yep. I think one of the things I'm trying to either do, I don't know, Coffee Dev or an article about is I think there is a spot to do a panel, I guess is what I'm looking for, is the best way to describe it. And there's two ways. I've seen it done both ways. My preferred way is you give the individual 3 topics that they are able to choose from that are preferably and usually related to the business that you're doing. So, and we'll just use Wealthsimple as an example. So you're a finance company. So maybe one is talking about implementing blockchain or using the blockchain, and you make them broad enough that the other candidate has some choices here. The other ones might be like PCI compliance in a regulated industry with coding. And the other might be, I don't know, atomic operations due to like financial banking, right? Like whatever. Or
covered a broad
and
set of
then
topics.
You set a minimum. I always tell people if you do this, unless there's a reason, such as a competing offer, the minimum time you give someone is 1 week. And you tell them, our expectation is that you come in and you're not necessarily an expert, but you're able to carry a conversation as if it was real life. So you, as if you had a conversation with a coworker about talking about, okay, you know, the PCI stuff. So it might be duties and responsibilities, and how do we have systems locked down? And what is the best implementation? What's too far? And what are requirements? And how can we do that? And you know, and you come in with assumptions. You can outline this, or you can give the facts beforehand, so that someone can show up and actually have a plan of like. I always say, even in these, it's even better if you can provide like some mimicked architecture diagram to what yours is, because then you can actually go in there and have a real life conversation, just like once you get through the interview, it's like an actual colleague conversation, and you get to see like, great. So I eliminate anyone who says that's way too much work. Okay, got it. I don't think you have a threshold that is so beyond, like on a technical expertise, that's so much. It's flexible enough that you are very open with the candidate. You say, look, you need more time to prep, no problem. You have work, I get it. Like, right? It's not paid. So, you know, and the reason why I say that it shouldn't be paid in this case, you are actually going to have a benefit to it. Like, the knowledge is going to carry forward. It is not like I came in and said, write this CRUD app that fucking nobody's ever going to use and you have no use for, and you never learned anything on implementing this CRUD app. Like, you know, if it's a topic where you know some of it or you know none of it, you're definitely going to come away with something. Like, you know, and I think that these, you get a better, I don't know, I don't have the stats. I don't work at a company big enough to get the stats, but I feel like this would help companies substantially get more, not devs maybe to apply if you're open about the process, and it not being just like, okay, you're going to show up, it's going to be algorithm data structures, and we're just going to grill you for 8 hours straight. Maybe, but I think this would get you more candidates that work out better, probably. I don't know. I don't have the numbers. I'm just going by gut here.
I agree with you. I think having improved process, people don't like rejection. So if you're lining them up to be rejected, they're not going to apply. There's a certain kind of weirdo who enjoys being rejected. And I say that as the person who falls in that category, where it's like, they said no, I'll try again. When can I try again? They said no again, we go again. And you just keep going, and it sucks, but there's not a lot of people, it seems like, do that.
Other thing I was going to say with that is, because I've had people comment being like, that's way too much work to ask on someone, because you're asking them to have a moderate level of discussion with people, because the idea is that your panel is somewhat an expertise level. Like they should be able to carry the conversation, go back and forth with you.
Mm-hmm.
But the other way is you just flip the script, which is you provide 3 topics that you can carry a very heavy, detailed conversation on, or you feel like it is at the highest strength of where your skill set is. And then you should assume that the panel is basically novice. And your job is to basically bring up those novice panels up to an intermediate level of conversation here. So you have to, like, one of your topics might be like, I don't know, whatever, MySQL and databases, or databases and maybe precisely MySQL. And then you would have the panel and actually walk them through, like, hey, okay, we're going to talk about locking and rows and why we don't want to do these things. And, because that doesn't take a ton of effort, because you're picking topics and you have the flexibility to pick topics that you should already have the adequate knowledge on. And you showcase, like you show practical showcasing on something that but your panels aren't novices. So they're going to have questions that are going to find where the edge of your boundary of knowledge is and how you work actually in that scenario. Like, can you take the quiz zone? Can you not? How do you work in that? Fuck, man, this is so much more practical. I wish I worked at a larger company to actually implement and test and just come up with the numbers and be like, look,
this is how we do it.
Like, maybe there's an actual better process here that doesn't make people just like hate interviews, like, and having to spend like a ridiculous amount of prep time prior. But that's my 2 cents.
It's weird you say that, because it's like, oh, a week is a very long time. If you're, I don't know what the expectations are with regards to new college grads and what they should just know, whether it's the syllabus that they've studied or not. But if you're coming out of a job and you're looking for a senior position, you're in for at least 3 to 12 months, depending on the degree at which you're working at the moment, of preparation. And it sucks. That's not like passive prep. That's like multiple hour sittings doing these things. Saying to someone, you've got a week to do this and you're going to learn some stuff, they're probably doing it anyway.
You know what's so crazy on this is, if you look in the industry right now, very few people want to hire juniors or even intermediates. They all want fucking seniors.
Yeah.
And then they go through candidates like Candy saying like, oh God, that person wasn't a senior. The ironic thing is, a lot of your juniors would probably pass your senior interviews, even though they don't have the senior knowledge. But because it's all about things that they've been primed for, and you've introduced a bias on that, it's like, versus what you're saying is people are working 40 hours, aren't doing what your interview prep is.
Not at all.
Nor do you want to go home and then spend 10 hours a week trying to just do stuff that's not really applicable to your day-to-day, or very rarely is. Like you said, LRU cache implementation, most optimal way. I think Primeagen talked about this one time where he said one time in his career at Netflix, he actually had to write something like this. And he's like, he just had to pull up the docs and start reading.
Yeah.
One time in someone's entire career.
Because
they actually have to implement it.
It's exactly that. We're looking for a relationship and hoping like hell that it's there, that someone who can implement an algorithm has interest in coding and has some skill. Not always there. There are people who are tremendously skilled at what they do and won't apply because they won't pass the algorithm test. Many pro engineers.
Me. Yeah. I'm like, I would rather just not have to do the prep. And and like I said, if I'm already going to put in that little prep, then the only companies I'm going to apply for is Fang. And it's exactly because the comp structure versus every other company is so outweighed.
The effort it's another analogy. Would you pay 90% of the cost for a burger to get 50% of the quality? Probably not. So you're telling me to put in 90% of the effort to arrive at 50% of the comp. Doesn't make sense to me at all. Yes, there's potentially better work-life balance and all these things, but it doesn't make sense. And nowadays it's even worse because you're competing against a company where the comp is potentially high, but the reputational cost is way higher. If you're some unknown company. You're like, come work for me. Cool. I work for you. What happens when I leave? No one works at companies until they retire. At least it seems like these days. And you're saying like, cool, come work for me for 5 years. And when you leave, you can, I don't know, start again. Whereas if you go, yeah, reprep and go again. If you say to someone, okay, cool, come work at Netflix. We will pay you a decent salary. You'll have a great time. When you leave, you can walk into anything. The moment you flick your LinkedIn status from at whatever company, whether it be a pre-FAANG or FAANG or just a big company name, when you flip that from I'm working here to I'm looking for a job, it's
the level of recruiters that you just got hit up.
It's insane. You can eat and drink for free for many, many weeks just off of recruitment events and everything else. It's not even fair. So that part sucks. But I guess it boils down to, at least for me, the question of like, how do you get developers to apply? Improve your process. Don't be a shitty company because we're going to know about it. Don't send marketing out to try and cover up that your company is not shitty because we're going to know about it. And just figure out what the hell you're actually doing so that we know and can apply for a job that we actually want, thinking we can get through the process. So that's my 2 cents. Yep. This is a hard question.
I think that was good. I was going to bring up this, but it's unrelated to applying. And this is tricky because if you focus on promoting internally for seniors and hiring more regular devs, the issue that I have seen is that essentially you've set an artificial time of an expectation that people get promoted regardless of the experience. And you it's very hard to do this, I think, because what's going to happen is to get people internally to not decrease your bar and to keep the bar where it should be, and to have people actually get promoted internally for senior. It kind of comes to what we're talking about. The level of effort then you have to put is almost not worth it, and you're better to just look externally. Just find the company that is going to then promote you for a higher comp because either the market comp has moved and the title, doing the exact same shit you're doing today, or the little bit of additional responsibility versus what that company is going to hold you to be a senior internally. I'm not saying all hires should for seniors should be externally, right? I'm just saying it is very hard to balance that because, this is something I've seen.
It sucks because I've been on teams where seniors are brought in from outside and they arrive and they're completely fresh. They're not quite sure what's going on. They know what the high level goal is. They can present you with all sorts of interesting solutions from the places they've come from or textbook solutions. But you have juniors who actually can get the work done quicker than they can. And you're going, why did this person not get promoted? Like, this doesn't seem fair. So I like seeing companies that promote people internally as a signal that there is growth opportunity. And not dry promotions. Like, no. I've already had my rant about shitty interview questions, but dry promotions are another one.
But then, because it's not just like the code output, right? Like the person who's not the senior who could just, pump out the code could implement something of garbage quality. It's like, well, but it works. Exactly. And there are time and places for that, right? Like it's always this trade-off.
We must measure lines of code.
Yeah. And I will say that the one nice thing that I usually like with having people externally hired, especially as you go up, because the roles become more of leadership.
Yeah.
And the nice thing when you hire externally in for a role of leadership is either they came with no political alliance or the amount of political bullshit with the company is less.
Yes.
They may have eye contact that I'd refer them into the company, and you can say, well, that's the politicalness right there. Mm-hmm. Okay, but someone who has already worked in the company is going to have vastly more on that. Yeah. And sometimes those roles are like, I see it with consulting. You'll go read the wikis, and the people who work there are already saying the same things.
Yeah.
But having the external voice of someone new come in and say the exact same thing, it's like, oh fuck, okay, they were right.
Yeah.
Like,
that's it. Mm-mm.
so anyways, that's probably a good spot.
Yeah. Just one last comment quickly
Yeah, go
on
ahead. Go
the
ahead.
from intern to junior hire. I almost always tell people that if they come in as an intern, unless you are an absolute unicorn in an ideal situation, you're going to be perceived as the intern for a very long time.
Yeah.
You can become junior or intern to junior to senior. It's going to be that one ass who you worked with who's still going to view you as the junior and joke about things in a weird, uncomfortable fashion about like, remember when you started and I was doing all that code and now you're my boss, ha ha ha. And then like awkward cringe. So that's there for sure. But I like the idea of there being some healthy movement from junior through to senior or from senior through to management or whatever the case is. I personally do like it when people they go from dev to technical lead to perhaps technical manager because you feel like there's trust. They know where all the skeletons are. That's awesome. And you feel like you can do it. And you need time as well to understand some of these things. But yeah, that's a whole other situation. Cool. I think we're done.
I was like, I'm thinking one of these we should do as a AMA or something.
Yes.
You know, I feel like maybe if we post on the R programming and convince the Twitch fans to go there and upvote, that we would get enough people to show up that we could actually just not have a topic and do it AMA. Because it's fun when chat comes in and says like something very particular to their circumstance and whatnot.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I thought this was also a good point of just like it is very valuable when people are moving. It's just
I would love to be on a code base for an extended period of time and actually call it mine, have ownership, have that like I know where all the bugs are, I know where all the pending optimizations are, and not fear that I'm not going to be able to progress financially and in terms of leadership and lose those. So that kind of resonates with me. I have had a great time spending extended periods on code where it's actually being improved, not just silly one-liners or like those code changes that go back and forth because someone argues about something every 6 months. So yeah, that's my thing. But yeah, I think we need to do an AMA.
Yep, and that's it. We'll end there. Adios.
Bye, everyone.